numbers are part of the work, but it's a people business. And so when we look at our data stories, like it's really about these individuals. And, the one thing that stood out to me too is, sitting here tonight, students can't succeed, they can't learn if they don't feel safe, and they don't feel heard was the word used. And that resonated with me also. Our school improvement goals have been and continue to be proficient in literacy across all disciplines, and all students will be valued and known. And so that's where the work is making sure that all students feel valued and known, and then the data follows with that. And so we're gonna go through, and you've seen the format of the slides before, and so we'll go through kind of the same format and then speak to really what our actions have been based on the data and the work that we're still moving into. So when we look at our MSTEP, so we've kind of talked through some of the things as our colleagues just shared, looking at the trends and patterns. Overall, yes, we saw that we were maintaining or even improving, even in spite of COVID. However, when we looked at our data, what really, kind of stood out to us that we have been working on, we continue to work on, and the work still needs to be done here and everywhere, is looking at that gap in our populations, our Black students, our English learners, and our students with disabilities. And so that's really our focus. You'll see kind of woven through in who we are and how we continue to look at those and look at ways that best serve our students in those groups. Second slide is our NWA, Fontes Pinnell, and Fastbridge. Again, kind of same trends and patterns, and you've already heard the not available and the reasons why you see so much of that in the data too, and the fluctuations. Now we get into the real work, and I'm very pleased to turn it over to Bridget Reynaert, our learning specialist, with especially in our reading focus.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to share with you some of the literacy, teaching, and learning that's occurring at East Hills. One of our target goals is that readers will think critically and make meaning from the text. This includes analyzing and responding to text. Upper elementary and middle school students have to read texts that are increasing in complexity, and texts can become more complex for a multitude of reasons: their readability, their structure, their purpose, and the increased content knowledge demands. Therefore, our instruction not only has to meet the needs of individual learners, it also has to meet the increasing demands of text. So our action step is that students will be able to identify key elements of text analysis. And to address that, this past summer, many East Hills teachers attended the Teachers College Reading and Writing Institute to grow our professional practices around facilitation of small group instruction. These frameworks support our Tier 1 and our Tier 2 instructional interventions. And a resource that teachers and students use is the learning progression. And the learning progression identifies a continuum of reading skills, strategies, and behaviors that begin with emergent readers all the way through career and college readiness skills. And we know our students are at various places along this learning continuum. So we, through Fastbridge and Fontes and Pinnell, identify where our students are on that learning continuum, meet them there, and then grow from there. And then our further study is that we, East Hills teachers also use performance assessments to provide assessments of higher order critical thinking reading skills. These assessments measure students on multiple skills, such as gathering text evidence, and the performance assessments include both literary and nonfiction assessments. They consist of students reading a text, they're asked to do a performance task, and then there's a rubric. And the rubrics can also be used by the students, so they can self-assess their own progress, celebrate their progress, set future goals. But it's also a useful tool for teachers because we analyze what skills students have mastered and where they need further instruction. And then we can create more responsive small group instruction. So as you can see, small group instruction is very effective because it meets students where they are with the focus of growing their academic skills. So thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. And, one of the best parts of working in a middle school is to work with the staff that we have that are represented both at BH and here at East Hills, and just the hard work that goes into making school and community a wonderful place. And that couldn't be more important now. And your support with that and our community's support is huge. So similar to the BH's presentation, as we look at the data, I kind of heard the conversation kind of being framed a little bit around like what do different assessments do? And one way I've heard it explained is like look an assessment window, like a home, so there are some rooms, that look a little different if you were to, peer into a home that you're interested in, and another room has a different view. And so one of the most important things, though, is to get that most complete snapshot of a child. So when you hear us talk about MSTEP or FastBridge or Fontes and Pinnell, or probably more importantly, our classroom assessments and the projects kids are doing, we're trying to get a view, in terms of what our children are performing and how well they're doing. So to Angie's point, similar trends in math that we saw with reading. Overall, some consistency, but those gaps that appear in our Black population, our students with disabilities, those are the areas of focus for us. And Julia is going to speak a little bit more to that. In looking at our other data, so NWA and FastBridge, it was interesting to see like some parallels in terms of our NWA data and how it relates to FastBridge, but also that sort of description that Pat gave of like a shorter cycle. I'm really energized by the fact that we're entering our winter window of FastBridge. We're actually already in it, and we'll finish that in January, so we'll have that data. And our staff is interested in looking at that more quickly, like a rapid cycle. Like it's one thing when the kids are gone to sort of talk about them to the next grade level as was described, but more importantly, it's like what are we doing right now with the kids that we're seeing in our classes? And FastBridge provides that for us as a tool as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julia Beattie, who's our IB teacher leader. And you saw this a little bit represented with BH, the importance of like being an instructional coach and supporting our staff and bringing the right team together. And so Julia plays that big role for our building, and she'll talk a little bit about our targeted math interventions.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here tonight, and I do have to give credit to Shauna Webby, our math interventionist, Emily Handy, our content area specialist for math, and our many wonderful math teachers for partnering in this work. I am simply speaking for them tonight and am a thinking partner with them along this journey. And we started looking at interventions in the spring, thinking of longitudinal data, looking at FastBridge data from the spring of last year to the fall of this year, in addition to classroom assessments to make some decisions for target study areas. The first is that students will be able to revise their thinking and consider common errors and misconceptions in mathematical processes as they grapple with complex problems. In addition to teaching content and concepts in math, our math teachers are really working to teach habits of mind. They use interactive notebooks, they use modeling of their own thinking when they're working through problems in math, and they show students how to highlight keywords and phrases, how to make connections to mathematical concepts that they're teaching. And working with our elementary teachers this fall, they really were thinking around how we balance time in the classroom between teaching that content and thinking of how we get students to transfer it to unfamiliar situations. And so taking those skills and allowing space and time in the classroom to do that practice of solving complex problems, both in small group and whole group instruction. And we are ongoing professional learning. An example of that is a book study that Emily Handy did. She's in her, I believe she just finished her second iteration of Rough Draft Math, that many of our math teachers have gone through this summer, and I had the pleasure of being part of the fall cohort around revisionist thinking. And what is really brilliant about that work is that it brings our math teachers together across the district, K-12, to not only think about new ways of revising our thinking and getting students to revise their thinking, but to share practices and to open doors and to be vulnerable with each other and share practices as part of the math equity work. This continues. It's such a big goal. We have 2 slides for it. Teachers are creating time again within construction to look for instruction to look at common misconceptions and foundational mathematical processes. An example of that is my favorite, no. And we'll keep looking at those foundational skills that students need to develop and balancing that time and space and instruction around foundational skills and solving complex problems. Our second goal is so important in math. It is that students will have formative practice opportunities and feedback to develop essential math skills. We know that formative assessment is essential in all of our subject areas, but essentially in math, and we learned that through virtual learning when it was really difficult to do last year, that giving students time to practice, to formatively assess, to either reteach a skill, to pull a small group, or to completely reteach a lesson based on the needs of our students. And our teachers will continue to look at FastBridge as a predictive screener this year, in addition to their math assessments in their classroom to help them continue to formatively assess their students. Last but not least, this goal is tied to our math equity work. And it is similar to BH's, I think if not exactly the same because it comes from our Math Equity Challenge. It is that students will construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. And the first real action taken in this is that teachers are engaging students in collaborative conversation based on a culture of trust and building that trust in the classroom. In addition to small group conversations and whole group conversations, our teachers are striving not just at the beginning of the year, but throughout the year to build norms, to build processes, and to get to know their students so that they are able to be vulnerable to justify their thinking, to elaborate on each other's thinking, to share their thinking even when it might not be right. And we are also, our teachers in math and across our core content areas are modeling this through the use of claim, evidence, and reasoning framework, and it's becoming more visible and transferable amongst our content areas. Another benefit that we have being part of the IB program, as Bridget mentioned with Criterion A analysis and language arts, is that we have common rubrics with common language. Again, building habits in students. Students are used to being assessed on how they communicate their thinking in math and how they express their rationale using common rubrics from 6 to 8 and really 6 through 10. And so those rubrics are used by teachers to give students feedback, and they're also used by students to be able to think about goals for themselves. And they're used throughout not only throughout the year, but throughout the middle years program. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jason to talk about some of our points of pride.
Thanks, Julia. And before I move to that slide, you look at that, this is the goal that's reflected. Constructing a viable argument and critiquing the reasoning of others. You know, what an important skill. I mean, that's like a bottom line skill in terms of interacting with others and doing it in the right way and doing it in math. So I'm very excited to have the support of our staff in looking at building those skills and improving our ability to be communicators. Lot to celebrate. Try to be brief. The ability to support students both in a everyday general education classroom setting, as well as supporting students in smaller groups is critical. So finding ways to provide the correct intervention, but owning it at all levels and working together, both in the classroom, but also in support classrooms as well. The critical role that literature plays in supporting a reading culture We know that literature provides windows into different worlds for students. It can reflect who you are and the importance of seeing yourself in literature. And I've been really proud of the work and the support we've had as a district in getting different forms of literature in front of our students. It's made a huge difference. It's a big part of the culture of East Hills and our district. Julia and others tonight have described all the different assessment structures to have students authentically demonstrate their learning. We have a great foundation with that, and the opportunity with the bond to have an environment that will support collaborative learning. I was a part of a furniture pilot exploration earlier today. We have like really exciting times in front of us, and I'm so thankful for the generosity of our community around that. To see students work across levels, to hear our high school students earlier this evening describe the ability and impact they have on middle school students. We get to see that in our building across the 4-8 continuum. So those relationships in our community are gigantic. And then finally, like the whole child. In Bloomfield, we support so many different opportunities for our students, and they see that reflected every school day in the courses they take. If it's drama, if it's choir, if it's music, down to design and beyond. And thinking of like how you communicate in math and how that transfers to communicating on a stage, how that transfers to being a scientist, to the different skills that each of you have in your fields. You know, we're working on that every day, and I'm so proud. We had a talent show earlier this week, yesterday and today, just seeing kids put themselves out there, and we have so much talent as has been reflected. So that is our doubled up middle school presentation evening. Yeah, and so thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason.
Jason, I just want to thank you and your team, and Randy, your team again. We're still in the middle of COVID. And I know from talking to you both, and Randy talking to you way too much nowadays, that all the protocols with COVID and everything that's required for contact tracing, and in the middle of all that, to continue to push this forward and working directly with LST and the full team to get this done so our students are still engaged in learning. Hats off. I know it would be easy to say we'll put this on the back burner until COVID slows down or goes away, but to take on this completely new challenge in the middle of the school year, hats off to you. Great job. Thank you, both.